So today, I'd like to welcome you to Active Brain University. Again, my name is Bob Stewart. We're going to talk about how to share real estate news online. Got a couple of Twitter handles up there at the top. If you want to talk about Active Brain on Twitter, you could do @ActiveRain, or you could hashtag ActiveRain for the purposes of this discussion today. I'm @ActiveBob. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/ActiveBob as well. We're going to talk about how to share real estate news online, and there's a lot of ways that we can share stuff today, especially as it relates to online, and I see a lot of it being done on a daily basis. And I think hopefully after today's call, I can convince you that maybe there's a little bit better way to share some of the information that's out there about the real estate market. And in these last couple of months, and especially as 2013 kind of flipped over, there's been a lot of really good news about the real estate market. But not all of this news is like specific to the market that you work in. In fact, a lot of the news that you'll see coming out is kind of this national news. And so how can we take that national news and apply it to our own businesses and help our own businesses and create content that's worth being shared? And then how can we go out there and kind of get it out to the people that might be most interested in it? So why are you going to spend the next 45 minutes with me? And I've never done this specific presentation before, so I hope we fit in right at 45 minutes. I'll keep my timer here to keep me on point. But why are you going to spend the next 45 minutes with me? Well, you want to become a trusted advisor for your clients. Okay? I mean, that's obvious enough, I think. This isn't the only way that you do that, right? A lot of that is done based on your one-on-one interactions with people once you're actually working with them. But any of us at any given time, or any of you at any given time, have a lot of potential people in your pipeline or in your sphere, or that you're connected to somehow, who aren't necessarily looking to buy or sell right now. And so that idea that you would become this trusted advisor, that one person that they think of when when they're getting ready to buy or sell real estate, that's going to be important to you. You want to share engaging content with your followers. So we've got Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and Google Plus and your blog and all these different places that you can engage and you have followers, or you got connections, or what friends, or whatever they're called. But we want to figure out what's some engaging stuff from a business perspective that we can share with them. Okay? We want to maybe get some people off the fence, and as the market starts to heat up, and I'm sure any of you guys that are working with a fair number of folks in your business, you've got those people that are kind of sitting out there and they're going, well, we want to wait and see. We're not exactly sure if now's the right time. And so maybe sharing some of this good news, maybe even some of the bad news that might be out there, is a way to get people off of the fence. And then you want to use this real estate news to your advantage to find new prospects, or to re-engage maybe old, cold leads that you have in your business. So you're going to spend the next 45 minutes with me. Hopefully by the end you'll have some better ideas on how to do this sort of thing with some of that real estate news that might be out there. So what are consumers hearing about your market, right? And again, I mentioned it right at the start. Things are starting to turn around in a lot of places around the country, okay? And there's all these lists that are coming out, the top 10 housing markets, and the cover of Money Magazine had, housing market rebounding, and there's just all this really good news out there. And it's almost impossible these days that people aren't seeing and getting this news from different sources, right? It's on their Facebook feeds. It's, if they're interested in Twitter, they're seeing stuff about it on Twitter. If they pick up the newspaper, they're seeing it there. They're seeing it on the news. This news is out there. So people are hearing about it, especially at a national level, okay? But is that the reality of what's actually happening in your local market? And furthermore, does it matter? Here's the thing. I'm going to say that it might not necessarily matter if the housing market is rebounding in your particular area in terms of you being able to become that trusted resource, okay? Because we don't always have to agree with the news that's being put out there. And so if we can take a piece of news, we can take a poll that was put out, we can take a top 10 list, or whatever it is, whatever the news that our consumers are hearing, if we can take that piece of news and actually get to the reality of what's happening in our specific market, that's going to put us in a really good position to kind of hit on those 4 points of why we're here today. Okay? So first let's talk about how do you find stories or data that are worth sharing with the people in your sphere. Here's a couple of ideas, okay? And these are things that I think as an engaged, kind of full-time, professional real estate person, that you should be accessing these sources during the course of a week. So Google Alerts, I'm going to give you some examples of some Google Alerts that I might set up for my particular market. Google Alerts are a great way, though, for you to go out and let Google find the real estate news that you're interested in. Our local and national news outlets, so if you get the newspaper, you read the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times, or you watch the nightly news, I mean, these stories are happening all the time right now, because as the housing market rebounds, it kind of takes the economy with it, and this is big stuff, right? So any newspaper you pick up in a given week, you're going to see some kind of a housing story. Most of the time you turn on the news, at some point in a given week, you're going to see these kinds of stories. Real estate news sites, a couple of you guys mentioned like Inman News, for instance. It's the newsletter that you would never or that you would never unsubscribe from. There are all RIS Media. There's all sorts of real estate news sites. If you ever wanted to find some real estate news sites or some good ones to maybe get subscribed to, go to Google and Google real estate news sites. There was actually a couple when I did that yesterday that I wasn't following, and now I am. Okay? Other bloggers are a great source of news, not because they're necessarily creating the news, but because they're reporting on it. And so if you can be out there following some other good real estate bloggers, you're going to come across news that they're writing about that you could potentially put your own spin on for your own market. Your own research, and I might add into your own research any research or findings that are being put out by your local realtor associations or your local MLS, right? And I'll give an example here in a little bit of a guy who wrote a blog post, sharing local news based on something that his local realtor association had put out. So there's a lot of places out there that we can find news at both a national and a local level. Here's a couple examples of some Google alerts that you might use, right? So you're just going to, you could Google, set up a Google alert. It's pretty easy, assuming that you have a Google account, which, 95% of us do these days, right? But set up some Google alerts for things that are kind of applicable to your market, and you might even set some more broad ones up to get you possible news out there about the national market as well. So if I was in Seattle, these are some phrases that I might consider setting up Google alerts for. And it doesn't have to be one of those things like, you can set your Google alerts up in a variety of ways. You can do it where it's real time, so like right when Google indexes the article, they send you an email, and if you do something, if you were to set all 10 of these up like that, you'd be getting an email from Google, twice an hour. But you can set them up daily, where just once a day it sends you all the alerts on all of the stuff that you have. So it's just one email where, hey, if you're thinking about writing something based on some real estate news, you've got this email from Google. You can go back and check and kind of comb through. You can set it up weekly. Okay, but get some Google alerts set up for your market. These will be a great source of blog fodder for you. Okay, so once we've found a news story, what we're going to do is we're going to determine whether or not we want to reinforce that data, or possibly we might decide that we disagree with it. Like if I was in a market somewhere here in the country that just was still not rebounding, right? Things were still there was still there's a lot of inventory on the market. Prices are still being held down, right? And there's this great national news out there about the housing market rebounding. I might decide to take the approach of, look, this is not applicable to our market. Okay, people find that refreshing, right? They're okay having somebody tell them, look, here's the reality of what's going on in our neck of the woods. I know the national news media is telling you that things are great, but here's the reality of it in our neck of the woods. So you're going to decide, am I going to reinforce this data, or maybe I'm going to disagree with what's been put out in this news story. Either way, I have the fodder for something to share. Okay, now there's a fundamental starting point when you're deciding that you want to share real estate news online, and I think this is something that, as I was going through in the last week and kind of setting the outline for this class up and kind of trying to find some good examples, I continually ran into people missing this fundamental starting point, and I understand why, because it's really easy to share something online today. But I believe if you miss this fundamental starting point, you're probably not getting everything out of those 4 kind of key points that we talked about earlier. And that fundamental starting point is your blog. Okay? So you guys, you're all Active Rain members. I'm hoping that you are all blogging. All right? The reason that your blog becomes the fundamental starting point for sharing real estate news is because you want to lead them back to you. Okay? And in some of the examples that I'm going to show in a little bit, people are sharing the news, but they're not necessarily sharing it in a way that leads them to become that trusted advisor, right? They're doing a good job engaging, they're sharing stuff that might make sense for their market, but using your blog as a launching point for the way that you share is very important. So this is an example, and this is based on the Real Estate is Back infographic that Active Rain and realestate.com recently put out, and it was based on about 2,400 of you guys, Active Rain members, responded to a survey that we did at the end of December that talked about what do you guys expect in 2013? What do real estate agents expect of their markets in 2013? So this is, it's not national news, but wow, 2,400 real estate agents around the country, and there wasn't one market where real estate agents expected housing prices to decline. Okay, that's a pretty cool stat. There was a lot of data behind it. If you read the full thing on realestate.com, there was some really good information in there. Now, you could have just shared that, right? And we'll talk about some of the places and the ways, and you guys know these places, right, where you could share this information. But what Deb did is she used the news that we provided. She used the Active Rain infographic, Real Estate is Back, and she made it local to Clark County, Washington. Okay? So she put some context around that news that showed what was actually happening in her local market. This is, again, it's the fundamental starting point, right? This is why people come to you or come to Deb to buy and sell houses in Clark County, Washington, because she understands the market. She can take a piece of news that's national and she can apply it to what's happening locally. Okay, so this is, I can't stress enough how important this is, and we're, today it's so easy to share, right? You find an article online, there's all sorts of buttons on the article, you can click like on Facebook, all of a sudden it's on your Facebook page, and you're sharing that person's article. You're sharing the article from Active Rain, you're sharing the article from the Wall Street Journal or from the New York Times or from the Seattle Times, your local newspaper. But what Deb did here is she used this kind of national news and she put some context around it for the people that she's interested in doing business with. Okay? This is ultra important. On any kind of a national news story, you can take this approach. Okay? The Money Magazine cover story that I mentioned earlier. When I was going through Google Plus looking for some good examples, I saw a lady, she was from Olympia, Washington, and she had shared that article from Money Magazine. And she had said, Money Magazine says housing is back. But what does that mean for Olympia? And she'd gone into her blog and she had written what I thought was a really good piece of content where she looked at some of the statistics that Money Magazine used in determining the housing market is back, and she applied those same things to her local market. Okay? Now, it took her a little bit of time, I bet, but she's real familiar with her market based on looking back in this lady's blog. She'd been doing her market reports. I could see them. She, it wasn't hard for her to put together something that played off of that Money Magazine story. Here's another example. Rich down in Albuquerque. He used a report released by the Greater Albuquerque Association of Realtors, right? So they released their home sales numbers for May of 2012. And then he went in and he put his own kind of spin on those numbers. He looked at the numbers himself. And in this case, if you were to read his blog, he did some reporting on the numbers, right? He reinforced that, yeah, this is what I'm seeing as somebody that's actually working here in the local market. Okay? This sort of thing, right? This is the way that you share something. You don't want to just go out and share Gar's report. Okay, I hope that makes sense to everybody why your blog would be kind of this fundamental building block upon which you're going to share. Because you want to get it out there so that people are coming back to your blog, and at the end I'll make a small mention of kind of calls to action on your blog. But think about, sharing something. Let's say he's sharing this data, and he just like put a link to the GAR report. Right? When somebody's over there on that GAR report and they're thinking, man, I want to buy a house now. Like, hopefully they're going to head back to Rich's, to Rich and on Facebook where they found it at, and then they're going to try to find his website. They're going to get over there looking for houses on his website, but maybe not, right? Maybe they just go to Google and type in, home for sale in Albuquerque, find a house in Albuquerque, right? Maybe they go to Zillow or Trulia. If Rich can get them back on his blog where he has some other kind of calls to action around the content, it's going to be a more natural way for him to kind of get them into his funnel. So your blog is kind of this fundamental starting point for sharing real estate news. Very important. Okay? So once you have that blog post, what do you do with it? Right? How can I actually share this post now? And remember, I'm going to be sharing a post. I'm not just going to be sharing some piece of news that I grabbed off of the Wall Street Journal. Remember, these are the things that we keep coming back to. We want to become that trusted advisor. We want to share engaging content. We want to get people off the fence. Right? Maybe we want to add some new prospects to our business or re-engage some past prospects. So you have this blog post out there, okay, and you've been to the Active Rain SEO class, so that thing's going to eventually get in front of some people, right? It might come up in some searches on Google. You might have some people that are subscribed to your blog and get updates via email or something whenever you post something new. Okay, so the post itself is out there, and what a lot of people do, and it's unfortunate, is that's where they end it, right? They just put it out there and they just hope, man, I hope somebody finds my blog. It's going to be the greatest day when they call me up and they say, ooh, I read that post you wrote. I want to buy a house with you, right? You do this long enough, that's going to happen. But don't let that be the end. So maybe you send it out in your newsletter, right? I'm assuming that some of you guys are still doing newsletters and you're chock-ing them full of great information. So in your newsletter, you could have just sent out a link. Hey, guess what? The Wall Street Journal, here's a link to a story in the Wall Street Journal where they say the national market's rebounding, and man, Albuquerque's on their list of top 20 places to buy this year, right? Wouldn't it be a little bit more impactful if you were to include your blog post, and instead of saying, hey, head over here and read this Wall Street Journal article, you would say, hey, the Wall Street Journal reported that the housing market is hot and Albuquerque is one of the top 20 markets. I'd like you to take a look at my interpretation of this Wall Street Journal article. Right? If you'd like to read the full Wall Street Journal article, it's in my blog post. Right? And then in your blog post, you're going to link off to that Wall Street Journal article. Maybe you're going to grab a couple of quotes out of that Wall Street Journal article. Right? We're never just going to post the entire article on our blog because that would be a copyright violation. But we can take snippets out of there, right, under fair use of copyright if we're going to be making commentary on those snippets. We can 100% link out of our blog back to the article, okay? So send it out in your newsletter. You may do these things, most of us are probably doing e-newsletters, but man, if you mail a newsletter out, great opportunity to point somebody to your blog where you're sharing your take on real estate news. maybe you decide to reach out directly to hot prospects or cold ones. So if you've been in this business for any amount of time and you're fairly decent, or maybe even if you're not decent, at generating leads online, you know that online leads are fickle, right? They take a long time to convert. Sometimes you don't hear from these people for months. Sometimes you feel like you're speaking into a black hole when you email them. That's all right. You want to have something valuable to provide them. And this kind of, local take on national stories is great information, right? They're hearing this stuff. They're out there. They're, that lead that's on your website that you haven't talked to ever in the 9 months since they registered on your site, right? They're still out there. They're still a real person. They're still getting the news from the newspaper, from the TV, from their Facebook feed, from the magazine that shows up on their door still. People still get magazines, by the way. You want to have something to try to engage them, all right? If you have hot prospects, people that are on the fence, somebody you talked to 6 months ago who was thinking about selling once the market got a little bit better, right? You want to directly reach out to them. I would encourage you to write personal emails to these people, leading them back to your blog post, right? Take some time. If you have a hot prospect that could potentially come off of the fence, based on like a national news story with a local perspective, reach out directly to those people. Email them. After you email them, follow up in a phone call a couple of days later, right? Hey, did you get the email I sent to you about, the Wall Street Journal saying that Albuquerque is one of the top 20 markets this year? Man, things are really getting hot, and geez, inventory's low. A lot of sellers that we're seeing are getting multiple offers on their properties. This is a great time to get into the market, right? Or those cold ones. Now, those cold ones, you're not going to do kind of an individual email, but any good database or CRM, it's going to give you the option to email out to kind of large sets of people, right? So the cold ones, you might just send one of those kind of more, I don't want to call them a form letter or something, but you're going to write one email referencing and linking back to your blog post that's going to go out to a larger number of people. Maybe you consider writing your own press release. And if you've ever thought about writing a press release, there's a variety of good reasons why you would do this. One is it could get picked up as like a local news story. Okay. The second one would be there's some inherent SEO value in writing press releases. If you would consider writing a press release based on the blog post of your local interpretation of a national news story, I would encourage you to go to Active Rain, and you'll notice from this screenshot here, right at the top of Active Rain, there's a search bar, and you can really search for anything in there. But if you were to search for writing a press release, there are a bunch of great articles on Active Rain from Active Rain members who have written press releases, and some of these articles are like step-by-step tutorials on writing a press release. It's a great idea. Okay, if you've never done one of these, give it a shot, right? Find some, seriously, you can't look anywhere today without seeing something about the housing market rebounding, right? Put together your own post about it from a local perspective, and then consider writing a press release about it. But maybe you could go even a little bit further. And it's probably been 2 years now, maybe a year and a half ago, I offered 10,000 Active Rain points to any Active Rain member that got published in their local news media. In fact, I'll offer that to all of you guys too. And a number of people took me up on that challenge and are now writing like weekly columns for their local news media. The news media today, especially locally, is under a huge amount of pressure as everything moves online to find good quality content. And you would actually be surprised how many of them are willing to take stories from an expert in a field. Okay, so you could actually contact like the editor at a small local newspaper or something and say, hey, are you guys interested in having like a weekly or a monthly real estate article? You could also contact journalists and ask them if they're interested in doing a story based on, you know, your local interpretation of a national story. It's pretty easy these days to track down a journalist, right? I know, like on the Seattle Times, which is the kind of my local newspaper, when I'm reading in there, almost every story, the author of the story includes like their Twitter handle or their email address. Now, there's probably a better way to go about reaching out to a journalist than some ways. You know, if you're going to consider doing this, you might just do a quick Google search for, you know, good strategies for contacting a journalist or something like that, just so that you're not, you know, one of the 50 people a day that might be reaching out to some of these people, especially if you're in like a larger market. Okay? So you can share it on social media. And this is pretty obvious, right? I mean, I'm going to venture a guess that most of you guys have some kind of a social media account. Okay? So we could share it on Facebook. And as I was looking through, here's the thing about any of these different places. Well, maybe not any of them, but definitely Facebook and Twitter. If all you ever do is share real estate news on Facebook, it's going to be useless, right? People are going to tune you out. They're going to eliminate you from their feed. They're not going to look at it. But if you share this kind of stuff in the context of the rest of your life, right? People will actually look at it, especially if you share good, valuable content with a local spin on it, okay? Lisa, she just missed it here. I don't mean to pick on her, but if you look at the post that she shared, this is great, right? Maine is the #3 in the list of top 5 states with the percentage of homes with positive equity. Awesome. If I live in Maine, that's something I want to know, right? Us Mainites, I don't know what they call themselves. They did a good job. They didn't overextend themselves. They didn't, you know, take out second lines of credit. They didn't, right? They did a good job. But she's sharing the story from Realtor Magazine. She didn't put her own local spin on it, right? She didn't give you anything in there that would lead you to believe that she should be that trusted advisor for you. And she just shared the story from somewhere else. But Facebook is definitely a place where you can share it. But again, don't be that person that all you ever do on there is talk about your real estate business and, wow, housing prices are heating up and now's a great time to buy and sell. And right? You want to do this in the context of what you would normally share on Facebook, the stuff you might share about what you did this weekend or the pictures of your kids, or right? If you want to see a really good example of somebody who's integrated their real estate business into Facebook, take a look at a guy named Sheldon Neal. Sheldon, S-H-E-L-D-O-N, Neal, N-E-A-L. He's not necessarily sharing articles like this, but I think he has a really good balance of kind of real estate versus personal on his Facebook page. And he said he's getting recognized around the community. People are saying stuff to him. They're, you know, it's impacted his business. LinkedIn is a little bit more businessy, right? So if you don't use LinkedIn, like let's say you have a LinkedIn profile, but you're not really posting anything on there, I would encourage you to post your business stuff to LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn's not one of those things like Facebook where it's better to have kind of this well-rounded approach to things. It's okay to share things from a strictly business perspective. Again, here's 2 examples where people are sharing information from other sources. Why not share the information from you and then reference those other sources? So those other sources kind of become the reinforcement, right? Zillow says, you know, there's going to be a 4% rise in residential prices. In our market, it's probably going to be closer to this, right? That would be the share on LinkedIn, and then the link would go to your blog post, to where you're, again, I just can't say this enough, but where you are reporting locally on something that everybody's hearing about nationally. Google Plus, here's that Money Magazine article, and Kate did it right. She actually shared, you see what she did? If you can read that, it says, last Friday we ran an infographic from realestate.com. That was the Active Rain sourced content. So the previous week, she had shared this news from real estate agents, and I actually went in and read this article on her blog, and what it said is, last week when I shared the news from realestate.com, I had a few commenters that said, oh, of course real estate agents are going to say the real estate market is great. And then the following week, she followed up with, hey, guess what? It's not just real estate agents. Money Magazine's out there. A lot of folks are out there. Now, one of the things she didn't do in this particular blog post of hers is she didn't really tie it back to her local market. But she's pretty consistent in doing that throughout her different posts. Here's one from Anita. Right? The reason I use this one is right down there at the bottom. Google Plus gets a lot of, what's the word? It gets poked at a little bit. It's kind of this, the common thought out there is it's this ghost town, right? Where really the only reason you post to Google Plus maybe is to help your organic Google rankings or something like that. I've used this one because at the bottom Anita said, you know, Bill said, hey, great job keeping everybody posted on the Warner Robins market. And Anita says, paying off nicely, working on my second client as a result of Google Plus. Right? Just sharing her take on her market via Google Plus. One of the things that she does very well in here is when you write a post on Google Plus, or when you share a post on Google Plus, make sure that the stuff you write about it, so she's got her link in there, but she's writing in there key phrases that somebody could potentially search for. So Warner Robins real estate, right? She's got some hashtags in there, right? So make sure that your descriptions are good for what your article's about. Okay, Twitter. Look, here's the deal. If you're not sharing stuff on Twitter already, just forget about it. It's not for you, right? Or don't just use Twitter to like go out there and post your real estate stuff. Because that's, again, your people aren't going to follow you. If they do follow you, they're going to start to tune out. Twitter's a little bit different. It's about engaging. It's about being able to have conversations with people. It's in a lot of cases, it's about listening to what people are thinking or saying. I think for a lot of people, in terms of like sharing our content on Twitter, if you're not actively using Twitter, it might not be a place that you would want to share this stuff. And same with Facebook. I mean, if you're not actively using Facebook, for you to now go on there and 3 times a week you post something about your real estate business, or people aren't going to be that interested in it. There's easy ways in these channels for people to tune you out if you don't take a well-rounded approach. Now with LinkedIn, I think it's more appropriate that you would take a business approach because LinkedIn is a little bit more kind of business related, right? Okay, so what's next? Well, you know, any chance I can take to get a picture of a dog on one of my slides, I'm totally going to do it. Any chance I can take to get a picture of a baby on one of my slides, I'm totally going to do it. Any chance I can get to get a picture of a baby and a dog on one of my slides, like you cannot imagine how happy this made me when I found this image on Fotolia. That's where I get all my images, Fotolia.com. Like, I just smile looking at this picture. Anyways, find a piece of news and write about it. Right? Like I said, it's pretty hard right now to look around you and not see a piece of national news coming out about the housing market. The key to this becomes, can you make that applicable to the people that you're connected with? Can you make that applicable to that cold lead that hasn't reached out to you in 9 months since he registered on your website? Can you make it applicable to that person who's sitting on the fence? Once you do that, then, once you have a good piece of content, we've got all these ways that we can share it beyond just posting on our blog, sitting on our hands, and waiting for the phone to ring and somebody to say how awesome we are. So I mentioned this earlier, make sure your lead capture is in place. So one of the things that I would encourage you to do, and I told Carrie to be on her feet because I was going to ask her to get some links. Carrie, can you grab a link to our 3rd class from our blogging boot camp that's creating calls to action, and send that link out to everybody? So we do a whole hour on creating calls to action inside of your blog, right? So you want to make sure that when you're creating this, this content, that the place the person is consuming the content, your blog, has calls to action or potential lead capture opportunities in it for you. Okay, and in that webinar, we talk about a whole, forms or, obvious links back to home searches or image calls to action. Or one of the other things I would encourage you to take a look at is the sidebar of your blog. So on Active Rain, you have, like, on the right-hand side under your image, there's some opportunity for you to include things in there. Like, your IDX might have a widget, like market leader professional folks can add a widget in there that allows people to search for homes. Okay? You want to think about, your blog in its totality, and does it have these kind of opportunities in there for lead capture?